Prime Harriet Agbinyi. Tonight, Nigerian military recaptures key border town of Baga in Borno State. Scores of militants drown in Lake Chad while fleeing bombardment. Polytechnic lecturers threaten indefinite strike to protest non-implementation of agreement by the government. Federal government set to prosecute individuals and organizations that violate public procurement process. And the US and UK consider deeper sanctions against Russia over worsening eastern Ukraine conflict.
On business news tonight, interbank overnight lending rates ease on liquidity inflow to the Treasury bills market.
And in sports news, after months of negotiations, Floyd Mayweather confirms long-awaited fight with Manny Pacquiao, worth record-breaking $200 million.
We begin tonight with more cherry news from the ongoing onslaught against members of the terrorist sect Boko Haram, as the military has announced that it has recaptured the key border town of Baga in Borno State. In a statement signed by spokesman of the Defense Headquarters, Major General Chris Olukolade, the military explained that this latest feat was achieved following coordinated airstrikes and troops' defiance of landmines to flush out the terrorists. He said a large number of terrorists drowned in the Lake Chad while fleeing the heavy bombardment by the Nigerian Air Force. Many others were also said to have sustained injuries. The troops, who were said to have arrived in the town in the early hours of today, allegedly recovered 5 anti-aircraft guns and several rifles, while over 34 motorcycles and 5 vehicles, including trucks used for operations by the terrorists, were destroyed. The military said mop-up operations are currently ongoing in Baga to ascertain the number of casualties, as well as several other locations already recaptured from the insurgents. Meanwhile, against the backdrop of the release of 158 women and children taken captive by Boko Haram during a raid on Katarko Yobe State last year, former British Prime Minister Gordon Brown has issued a fresh plea for the release of the 220 Chibok girls. In a statement by the United Nations Information Center in Lagos, the former British Prime Minister urged Boko Haram militants to free the girls who were abducted in April last year. Mr. Brown, who is the United Nations Special Envoy for Global Education, said that the girls' families have suffered 10 months of cruelty and anguish despite a worldwide Bring Back Our Girls campaign. He said, quote, "I am making a humanitarian plea. Now they have released some hostages, they should release them all. We will keep up pressure until they are all released," end of quote. According to the UN envoy, the world body will mark 1 year of captivity of the girls with a vigil planned in New York on April 14, that is, if the girls remain in captivity. Men of the Nigerian Navy who see the uniform as an opportunity to harass members of the public or get into mischief during the upcoming elections will be court-martialed. This warning is coming from the Chief of Naval Staff, Vice Admiral Usman Jibrin, who read the Riot Act to senior and junior officers while on an inspection of naval bases in Lagos. The Navy boss also urged officers to support the Nigerian police and the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, as this is part of their constitutional responsibility.
Must any personnel of the Nigerian Navy take measures either at official or individual level which can bring the non-partisan role of the Nigerian Navy in the electoral process into question. I must caution you to be extra careful in what you say, whom you say it to, and in what fora you express any opinion that has political coloration or is capable of being misinterpreted as such. I must make it absolutely clear that I place the highest premium in the maintenance of positive goodwill with the larger Nigerian population. The Nigerian public are the true owners of the Nigerian Navy. It is therefore the duty of every one of us in uniform to do everything within our powers to always be seen in most positive light by members of the public. Any further case of public misbehavior or misdemeanor that will bring the image of the Navy to disrepute will be dealt adequately. And in this case, what I have in mind is that if your action occasions the death of a civilian, there will be an immediate court-martial.
The Chief of Naval Staff, Vice Admiral Usman, Jibrin. Away from security to education matters now, and the troubles in Nigeria's Polytechnics are far from over, as the Academic Staff Union of Polytechnics, ASUU, has threatened to embark on an indefinite strike on Wednesday, February 25th. The president of the union, Mr. Chibuzo Asomoga, told journalists in Abuja that government has not implemented any of their demands since the suspension of their last industrial action last year. The union also complained about the dichotomy that exists between polytechnic and university graduates.
ASUU shall embark on an indefinite strike action until all the ongoing anomalies in our polytechnics are addressed. As at the time the Minister of Education came in, he pleaded that we gave him more time as he was coming in with every assurance that he gave us. And to give him a benefit of the doubt, believing in his pedigree, we gave him 3 months. He agreed to the, in fact, he suggested the 3 months, within which he said all the issues would have been resolved. Now we are in the 8th month, no issue has been resolved. So when we gave the ultimatum, we gave it with every sense of responsibility. We stick by the ultimatum, and if there are no attenuating circumstances that would, make us amend that ultimatum stands that on the 25th of this month, ASUU will, without recourse to any other person, except this particular neck, proceed on an indefinite strike on the issues that we have raised.
While the Imo State government has faulted claims by the Minister of State for Education, Vala Onwuleri, that the 305 twin-story school buildings in the state was funded by the federal government through the Universal Basic Education Commission. The executive chairman of the Imo State Universal Basic Education Board, Mrs. Gertrude Oduka, said the claims are misleading and an attempt to discredit the efforts of the present administration's efforts in the state's education sector.
Some of the primary twin-story building in contention replicated in all the 305 wards in Imo State to ensure that primary education gets to the grassroots.
Yes, Sister, who spoke?
On various occasions, the state governor, Rochas Okorocha, has always maintained that quality education is one of the key priorities of his administration.
For me, the anchor of my administration is education. And we have demonstrated this in the construction of 305 schools, model schools, right now going on in all the world.
Recently, the Minister of State for Education came out with claims that the federal government, through the UBEC counterpart funds with the state, was instrumental to the construction of the school buildings.
Imo State, this was their prototype, the twin-story building. You see, that was the prototype that was submitted because the government gives you the opportunity to even get your contractors and bring your prototype. So that was the design for Imo State, the schools, the 305 schools. And if you remember, initially, the government of Imo State has never mentioned to Imo people that federal government has even built. I'm surprised, Oduka is telling you now that federal government built 57 schools now, but the 305 is only built by God. But before now, they have never been a forum where they have mentioned any school built by federal government. So this is just damage control.
But the Imo State Universal Basic Education Board attempts to set the record straight, insisting the 305 schools are totally different from the ones the UBEC and state counterpart funds facilitated.
Even though UBEC has assisted in giving us their matching grant, that does not warrant UBEC, warrant federal government official to come down here and commission such a project. Because under normal circumstances, is a joint project. And if there should be any commissioning at all, it should be both parties. Wherever you see any inscription, UBEC Inzubeb/Inzubeb on the building, those were the ones built with the counterpart fund, the joint fund.
While the Imo State government wants the minister against plotting to commission the schools, the Federal Ministry of Education says it has a right to.
I stand and be quoted anywhere. The federal government was instrumental to those schools, and each of those schools cost 40.6 million.
Accusation and counter-accusations may be flying between both parties, but what most Imo citizens want is a peaceful education sector that promotes the development of the primary school pupils.
In part 2, after the break, the police begin investigation into the violence that marred APC governorship rally in Rivers State. That's in a moment. Please stay with us.